The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on the 14th floor of Northway Global, and Janelle Carter, invisible as she'd been for 29 years, made the mistake of answering it. Outside, the snowstorm had turned savage. Inside, the building breathed with that particular silence of late shifts, the hum of fluorescent lights, the whisper of heating vents, the soft scrape of Janelle's mop against marble floors that cost more than she'd earned in 5 years. She'd been cleaning these halls for 8 months now. Before that, other halls. Always at night. Always when the important people had gone home. A woman in a tailored suit rushed past, phone pressed to her ear, pushing Janelle's supply cart aside without a glance. The cartwheels squeaked. The woman never broke stride. To her, Janelle was furniture, a shadow, part of the infrastructure, like the elevators or the exit signs. Janelle adjusted her grip on the mop handle. Her mother's hands had held mops too, in Fairbanks, in that little apartment where winter pressed against the windows like a living thing, where her mother had whispered words in a language that sounded like wind over tundra, teaching her not to fear the cold. Invisible, her mother had said once, doesn't mean powerless. It just means they're not looking yet. Janelle had never understood what she meant. Then the phone rang. Harold Bennett, the night security guard, looked up from his desk at the end of the hall. He was 67, patient as stone, and he'd watched Janelle for months with eyes that actually saw. "Leave it," he said quietly. "Cleaners don't answer phones." But Janelle had already heard the voice on the other end, panicked, foreign, breaking through static, and one word she recognized. Yakutia. Her hand reached for the receiver, and 14 floors above, in a darkened office, CEO Daniel Wright stopped mid-sentence in his conference call, because the voice that answered, soft, steady, speaking words he thought he'd never hear again, belonged to a woman who wasn't supposed to exist. What happens when the one person who can help is the one person nobody sees? The voice came through, crackling with distance and fear. A man speaking rapid Russian, then something else, something older. Words tumbling over each other about cargo routes and whiteout conditions and temperatures dropping to -40. Janelle closed her eyes. She could see it without seeing it. The endless white, the way the wind could strip flesh from bone, the isolation that turned men into ghosts. Her mother had described it 1,000 times. Yakutia, where winter lasted 9 months and darkness swallowed everything. "Manan Chabai," she said into the phone. "Wait. Breathe." The voice on the other end stopped. Harold stood up from his desk, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Janelle spoke slowly, carefully. Her Yakut was basic, childhood level, learned from lullabies and her mother's stories about the Saka people who'd befriended them during those 3 years in Fairbanks. She'd never used it professionally, never told anyone she knew it. Who would have asked? "Tell me where you are," she said in broken Yakut, then Russian. "How many trucks? How many people?" The man's breathing steadied. He gave coordinates. She wrote them on the back of a cleaning supply inventory sheet, her handwriting small and precise. "Help is coming," she told him. "Stay in the cab. Run the engine for 15 minutes every hour. Not more. Do you understand?" "Yehumayum," the man said, "Thank you." And the line went dead. Janelle stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, her heart hammering. "Where the hell did you learn that?" Harold's voice was soft with wonder. "My mother," Janelle said. She hung up the phone carefully, as if it might break. "She worked in Fairbanks when I was little. The Yakut community there. They helped us when we had nothing." She learned their language. Taught me. "You speak Yakut?" "A little. Enough." "And you never told anyone?" Janelle picked up her mop. The water had gone cold in the bucket. "Nobody ever asked." Harold stared at her. Really stared. The way you look at something you've walked past 100 times and only just now noticed it's beautiful. But 14 floors up, something else was happening. Daniel Wright sat alone in his executive office, the lights off, watching snow batter the windows. The conference call he'd been on, board members in Tokyo, investors in London, had dissolved into static when the building's phone system hiccuped. That's when he'd heard it, bleeding through the internal lines. A woman's voice, speaking Yakut. His hands were shaking. He hadn't heard that language in 11 years. Not since Yakutia. Not since the storm that should have killed him. He'd been 23, freshly promoted, arrogant with youth and confidence. He'd insisted on surveying the cargo routes personally, ignoring the local warnings about the weather. The storm had come down like the end of the world. For 3 days he'd been trapped in a transport station with failing heat and dwindling supplies, certain he would die. Someone had talked him through it. A voice on the radio, calm, patient, speaking Yakut and broken English, telling him how to survive. He'd never learned who. When he'd been rescued, the company had buried the incident. Liability, they'd said. Optics. The reports had listed him as delayed due to weather conditions. Nothing about fear or frostbite or the moment he'd written goodbye letters to his parents on the back of a fuel manifest. He'd spent 11 years building walls, trusting systems, not people, believing that emotion was weakness and vulnerability was risk. And now, someone in his building spoke the language that had saved his life. He pulled up the employee directory, searching for anyone with linguistics credentials, language specialists, translators. Nothing. He tried HR records, operations, security. His assistant knocked, Elena, efficient and unflappable, and poked her head in. "Sir, there was a call escalated from the Yakutia route. Did it reach you?" "Who answered it?" "I'm not sure. It came through the 14th floor line." "The 14th floor!" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's operations and—" "Janitorial," Elena finished. "Night shift." A cleaner. Someone had answered an emergency call who had no business, no clearance, no authority to touch that phone. And she'd spoken Yakut. Daniel stood, his heart rate climbing. "Get me the security footage from tonight, 14th floor, and find out who was working that section." Elena hesitated. "Sir, if this is about protocol violation—" "Just do it!" When she left, Daniel pressed his palm against the cold window, watching the snow fall in sheets, and remembered the voice that had kept him alive when the system had left him to freeze. He'd trusted the system for 11 years. What if the system had been wrong? Could the voice that saved him once be hiding in plain sight? Or had the system already erased her? Karen Doyle arrived at precisely 7:30 a.m., as she had every workday for 6 years. Coffee in hand, heels clicking against marble with metronomic certainty. She'd been operations manager long enough to know that order was everything. The overnight incident report waited on her desk. Unauthorized or phone usage, floor 14, 11:47 p.m. Janitorial personnel. Karen's mouth compressed into a thin line. She cross-referenced phone logs with the shift schedule. Janelle Carter, night cleaning crew. No authorization to touch anything that didn't involve disinfectant and floor wax. Karen had built her career on one principle. Everyone stays in their assigned lane. No exceptions. She drafted the violation notice herself, each word chosen with surgical precision. By 9 a.m., it landed on Daniel Wright's desk. He read it twice, standing beside his window where morning sun transformed the snow-covered city into something almost beautiful. "Elena," he said into his desk phone, "send Janelle Carter up immediately." "Sir, she works nights. She's likely sleeping." "Then wake her. Tell her it's urgent." The security footage had revealed everything. Janelle at her cleaning cart, frozen with indecision. Harold saying something cautionary. Janelle lifting the receiver anyway, speaking Yakut with careful precision. Someone who learned it from love rather than textbooks. And then, as if saving someone's life was simply part of her job description, she'd gone back to mopping. Janelle arrived at 10:30 a.m. in her work uniform. Gray polo with the company logo, dark pants bearing a bleach stain on the left knee. She looked exhausted. Harold insisted on accompanying her, standing in the corner of Daniel's office, arms crossed. "Miss Carter," Daniel said, gesturing toward a leather chair. Janelle perched on its edge, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Do you know why you're here?" "The phone call. I shouldn't have answered it." "No," Daniel agreed. "According to protocol, you shouldn't have. But you did. And you spoke Yakut, a language most people couldn't identify, let alone speak. Where did you learn it?" "My mother taught me. We lived in Fairbanks when I was young. There was a Saka community there who helped us during difficult times. My mother cleaned houses. I was lonely and scared of the long winters. They taught me their language so I wouldn't be afraid when the snowstorms came." "Yet you've never listed it on any application." "No, sir." "Why not?" Janelle looked up, her eyes carrying years of weariness. "Because nobody ever asked what I knew. They only asked what I could clean." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. "There's something else." He rotated his computer monitor toward her. 5 years ago, this company ran a major logistics operation in Yakutia. Significant language barriers. We contracted external support. Janelle's face went completely still. "There's a report here. 14 pages of translated communications, cultural notes, protocol recommendations. Exceptional work. Probably saved us hundreds of thousands in delays." Daniel's voice dropped lower. "But there's no name attached. Just contract support, file 47B. "That was my work," Janelle said quietly. "I was temporary staff, 3-month contract through an agency. They needed someone who understood Yakut dialects for the winter operations." "And when the contract ended?" "They thanked me, paid the invoice. That was it." She lifted one shoulder in a small shrug. "They needed the translations. They didn't need to know who provided them." Harold made a sound deep in his throat, something between a cough and barely suppressed anger. Daniel stared at the report. Somewhere in these pages was the foundational work that had filtered down through the company's emergency response system. The protocols she'd helped establish had become part of the infrastructure that saved his life during that winter storm. She'd built the system that rescued him. And the company hadn't even recorded her name. "There's a formal violation report," Daniel said. "Operations Manager Karen Doyle filed it this morning. You answered a phone outside your job description. Technically, she's correct." Janelle stood, her legs unsteady. "I understand. I'll clear out my locker." "Sit down, Miss Carter." She sat. "I'm not terminating your employment. I'm trying to understand something." Daniel leaned forward. "You possess a skill that could have transformed your career. Why didn't you fight for recognition?" Janelle met his gaze with eyes that had witnessed too many closed doors. "Because the system never asked," she said simply. "And I learned a long time ago that if the system doesn't ask, then my voice has no value. Speaking up when you're not invited, that's how invisible people get erased completely." The silence that followed was the sound of everything Daniel Wright believed about fairness shattering into irreparable pieces. Outside, the winter storm intensified, and he thought about all the voices his perfect system had been designed to silence. Sometimes, the people who save us are the ones we've been taught not to see. But what happens when you finally open your eyes? Karen Doyle's office occupied the 15th floor. Smaller than Daniel's executive suite, but meticulously organized. She'd grown up bouncing between 7 foster homes before aging out at 18, invisible to everyone who mattered. She'd learned young that rules were the only protection. Follow them rigidly, and you'd never be at anyone's mercy again. When Daniel requested an immediate meeting, she arrived prepared with documentation. "The Carter situation," she began, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I've drafted a formal reprimand. First offense, so no termination. But it must be documented for liability purposes." "Why?" Daniel asked. Karen blinked. "Excuse me, sir?" "Why must it be documented?" "Because she violated clear protocol. She's janitorial staff. She answered an operations line during an active emergency. That falls entirely outside her role. She also, potentially, saved a cargo shipment worth $500,000 and prevented 4 deaths in a winter storm," Daniel said quietly. "With respect, sir, that's not the relevant point. If we allow staff to step outside their defined responsibilities, we create massive language exposure. What if she'd given incorrect information? What if someone had died because an unqualified person made decisions above her authority level? But nobody died. In fact, the opposite happened." Karen's jaw tightened. "Today, nobody died. Tomorrow, who can predict? Rules exist for critical reasons, Mr. Wright. The moment we start making exceptions for good intentions, we undermine the entire structural foundation." Daniel studied her. This woman who'd built armor from procedure manuals, who'd survived childhood chaos by creating adult order. He understood her better than she knew. "Miss Doyle," he said carefully, "did you know that 5 years ago, Janelle Carter provided translation services for our Yakutia operation?" Karen pulled up something on her tablet. "I have no record of any such arrangement." "No, you wouldn't. She was contract support through an agency. The company used her expertise but never credited it, never retained her name in our files. Then she should have negotiated better contractual terms." She was 24 years old and probably desperate for any income. We held all the power in that relationship. Daniel's voice remained calm. We extracted what we needed and erased her like she never existed. That's not protocol, Miss Doyle. That's exploitation dressed up in professional language. Karen's expression went carefully neutral. I'm not here to debate historical HR decisions, she said firmly. I'm here about a current, documented violation. Then let me show you something else. Daniel pulled up security footage from 3 weeks earlier, a Saturday morning on the executive floor. A senior vice president had spilled coffee across his desk minutes before a crucial presentation. The footage showed Janelle, who'd been cleaning nearby, immediately stepping in to help. She'd blotted documents, salvaged what she could, even suggested which pages were most critical. The VP had grabbed the rescued materials and rushed away without a word, without even looking at her face. Did he file a commendation for her quick thinking? Daniel asked. Of course not. She was simply doing her job. Was she, though? Or did she go far above and beyond, and we didn't even notice, because we've collectively decided she's invisible? Karen stood abruptly. Mr. Wright, I don't know what point you're attempting to make, but… The phone rang, cutting through the tension. Elena's voice came through the speaker, strained.
Sir, we have another critical situation developing in Yakutia, Eastern Route. The winter storm is worsening rapidly. Our local coordinator is completely overwhelmed, and we desperately need someone who speaks the dialect. I've contacted every translation service in our network, but with the time difference…
Route it to conference room B, Daniel said decisively. Immediately. He looked at Karen. Come with me. They found Janelle in the 14th floor break room, sitting with Harold, both nursing coffee from styrofoam cups. She looked up when Daniel entered, and he saw it clearly. That instinctive flinch, the automatic impulse to make herself smaller. Miss Carter, he said gently, I need your help again. 5 minutes later, they were assembled in the glass-walled conference room. Janelle, Daniel, Karen, and Harold, who'd absolutely refused to be excluded. The video call connected. A frantic logistics coordinator in Yakutsk, 3 truck drivers stranded somewhere in the vast frozen wilderness, and a situation spiraling rapidly toward tragedy. Karen stood rigidly in the corner, arms crossed. Daniel gestured toward Janelle. Whenever you're ready. Janelle looked at the screen, at the desperate, frightened faces, at the digital map showing dots representing human beings trapped in temperatures that could kill within minutes. She reached for the microphone. And Karen spoke sharply. She doesn't have clearance for this level of communication. Everyone froze. Janelle's hands stopped halfway to the microphone. She's not qualified, Karen continued, her voice hard with certainty. She has no credentials, no official training, no documented expertise. And frankly, sir, this is just Russian. We can find a proper… It's not Russian, Janelle said quietly. Karen turned to her. What did you say? It's not Russian. Janelle looked up, and for the first time, there was something like quiet steel in her voice. It's Yakut, Saka dialect specifically. There are crucial differences in tone, in formal structures, in the way you ask for help or give instructions. If you use Russian, they'll answer you eventually. But if you use Yakut, if you speak their heart language, they'll trust you immediately. And right now, in that snowstorm, trust is the difference between 4 men living and 4 men dying. The conference room went silent except for the desperate static from Yakutia. Daniel leaned forward. Miss Doyle, you're absolutely correct. Janelle doesn't have an official title, She doesn't have formal credentials or documented training. She doesn't have structural authority. But she has the answer. And right now, that's what matters more than anything else. He turned to Janelle, his voice gentler. You don't have to do this. You can say no. But if you're willing... Janelle looked at the screen one more time, at the men whose faces had gone gray with cold and mounting fear. She began to speak. Her yakut flowed like water over ancient stone, careful, clear, carrying warmth through the frozen distance. She asked questions, gave precise instructions, talked one driver through early hypothermia symptoms, another through critical fuel conservation. She stayed on that call for 47 minutes, her voice never wavering. And when it finally ended, all 4 men were accounted for, all trucks secured, rescue teams dispatched with exact coordinates. She pushed back from the table, hands trembling visibly. And then she looked at Daniel with eyes full of something that might have been hope or might have been heartbreak. I just want to be sure, she said, her voice cracking slightly, that next time the system will actually ask, that this isn't just an emergency exception, that invisible people might finally be allowed to exist. She stood and walked toward the door. Harold followed her without a word. Karen stood frozen, watching them leave, something unreadable crossing her face. Daniel sat alone in the conference room, staring at the empty chair where this shy girl had just saved 4 lives, and thought about all the voices his perfect system had been specifically designed to silence. When the rules protect order but destroy people, who has the courage to rewrite everything? Change came slowly, like ice melting after a long winter. Daniel had learned, after 11 years of running a global logistics company, that the systems you build become living organisms. They grow deep roots. They resist modification with surprising strength. Pull one thread, and 20 others tangle in resistance. But some things couldn't wait for slow, careful change. He called an emergency board meeting within 48 hours, laid out the situation, not in sanitized corporate language, but in raw human terms. Told them about a woman who'd been erased from their records, despite providing work that had saved lives and prevented catastrophic financial losses. Told them about a night cleaner who spoke a language they didn't know they desperately needed until crisis struck. Told them, without saying it directly, that they'd built a system so rigid it could watch people drown and call it proper procedure. The board split cleanly down the middle. Half saw license exposure and risk. Half saw untapped opportunity and wasted potential. Daniel broke the tie with 3 words. We do better. We're restructuring our emergency response protocols effective immediately, he announced. And we're conducting a comprehensive audit, every contract worker from the past 7 years. I want their names, their actual contributions, their real work, not just invoice numbers and file codes. That will take months, someone objected from the far end of the table. Then we start today, Daniel said. Right now. Karen Doyle was not fired. Daniel had considered it late at night when his anger felt righteous and simple and clean. But terminating her would have been easy. It would have been the same kind of thinking that created the problem in the first place. Eliminate the person, ignore the system that shaped them. Instead, he did something harder and more uncomfortable. He removed her from all HR authority. Reassigned her to facility operations. Important work. Necessary work. But work that didn't involve deciding who got to speak and who had to stay silent. She kept her salary, kept her benefits, kept her office, though it was smaller now, with a window that faced the parking lot instead of the city skyline. She sat in meetings where she'd once been asked for her input, and now nobody turned to her for opinions. She ate lunch alone at her desk. She filed reports that people acknowledged with polite nods before moving on to more important matters. She was learning, slowly and painfully, what it felt like to be invisible in a building where she'd once held power. Daniel didn't enjoy watching it, but he didn't stop it either. Some lessons couldn't be taught gently. Some understanding only came through experience. Harold Bennett was invited to the final restructuring meeting, the one where Daniel announced the new community liaison position, a role specifically designed to identify talent and skills that fell outside traditional HR channels and rigid job descriptions. Harold sat in a conference room that probably cost more than his annual salary, surrounded by executives in expensive suits. And when Daniel asked him to share his perspective, his eyes filled with trembling tears that he didn't bother hiding. "I've worked nights for 19 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And in all that time, I've watched people walk past each other like ghosts. Like if you don't have a title on your door, you don't have a soul worth acknowledging." He looked directly at Daniel. "What you're doing here? It's not charity. It's not some inspirational corporate initiative. It's just basic human decency. And it's about time someone remembered that matters." The room fell silent. Someone started clapping. Then another person. Then everyone. Harold wiped his eyes and cleared his throat. "There are others like Janelle," he said firmly. "People who know things, who see things, who could help if anyone bothered to ask them. Give me 6 months and I'll find them for you." "You have a year," Daniel said, "and whatever budget you need." When the meeting ended, Harold stood alone in the hallway, staring at his reflection in the polished floor, and thought about all the years he'd watched good people make themselves smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. Not anymore. Janelle didn't attend the meeting. She'd specifically asked not to. "I don't need a stage," she'd told Daniel quietly. "I just need to know the door is actually open, that it's not just temporarily unlocked during emergencies." So she learned about the changes through an email, sitting in her small apartment with its thrift store furniture and secondhand books. And she cried. Quietly, the way she'd learned to do everything, into her now cold coffee. The system had finally asked. After all these years, someone had actually asked. When the walls finally come down, what do we build in their place? 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, when winter sun transformed the city into silver and glass, Janelle Carter walked into Northway Global through the front entrance. Not the service entrance. Not the loading dock where deliveries arrived. The front door, like she belonged there. She wore clothes she'd bought new. A simple gray dress, comfortable shoes, a coat that actually fit her properly. Her ID badge read, Internal Training Advisor, Cultural and Linguistic Resources. It displayed her name, her photograph, her real title. The security guard at the main desk, not Harold, who now worked days in his new position, looked up and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter." "Good afternoon," she replied. 2 simple words, but they felt like an entire conversation she'd never been permitted to have before. Her office was modest. 10th floor, shared space with 2 other advisors. But it had a window. She could see the street from here. Watch people come and go. Be part of the world instead of cleaning up after it vanished for the night. Daniel stopped by that first afternoon. Knocked on her door frame. She'd insisted on an open door policy. Wanted people to feel they could enter without fear. "Settling in okay?" he asked. "Getting there." He held 2 cups of tea, offered her one. "Chamomile. Thought you might need it after your first day." Janelle accepted the cup, wrapped both hands around it. The warmth spread through her fingers like a small blessing. "I trusted the system for 11 years, Daniel said, leaning against the doorframe. "I genuinely believed that if you followed the rules and did excellent work, the system would recognize you, would protect you, would see you." He looked at her directly. "I forgot about the people. I'm deeply sorry for that." Janelle sipped her tea slowly. "You remembered eventually. That's more than most people ever do." "That's not nearly enough." "No," she agreed honestly. "But it's a start, and sometimes a start is all you need." Through the window, snow began to fall. Gentle this time, not the violent winter storm of 3 months ago. Just soft white flakes drifting down like forgiveness, like second chances. Daniel watched them fall. "I was trapped in a snowstorm once, in Yakutia, 11 years ago. Someone guided me through it on the emergency radio. Never learned their identity. Kept me calm. Kept me alive when I thought I'd die alone in the cold. When I heard you speaking Yakut that night, I wondered if maybe there was a reason. Maybe the voice that saved me was trying to save someone else, and I was supposed to finally hear it." Janelle looked at him. This man who'd built walls so high around himself, he'd forgotten what sky looked like. "I don't believe in fate," she said. "But I believe in paying attention. And I believe that if we're brave enough to be seen and wise enough to actually look, then maybe, just maybe, we stop missing each other in the dark." Daniel nodded slowly. "Harold's identifying 4 more people like you. Different skills, different stories, all of them invisible until now." "That's good. That's really good." "He wants to name the program after you." "Absolutely not," Janelle said. But she was smiling for the first time in recent memory. "This isn't about me. It's about everyone the system forgot to ask. Everyone who had something heartwarming and valuable to offer, but was never given the chance." Outside, the snow continued falling like a promise being kept. And somewhere on the 14th floor, a new night queener answered a phone without hesitation, because this time, someone had told her she could. Someone had taught her that her voice mattered.